Internet culture on the internet, and Nuri Meme, which we acquired in April of this year, which is basically Wikipedia for internet culture. So in just under 4 years, this is already outdated, but we've reached a little over 20. We reach a little over 20 million visitors every single month. And this came from me not wanting to go get another job, me wanting to be my own boss by buying a cat picture website. And if you think that's remarkable, in January of this year, we received a $30 million venture capital investment to take our mission and move it forward and reach the masses. 21 million is just 20 million plus is not enough. We're going to continue to grow. And this is actually our very first venture capital raise, and which makes it one of the largest in Seattle. So why did we raise this money? Why are we trying to make fail images and memes and cat photos more and more popular? Well, it turns out that our mission is to make the world happy for 5 minutes a day. Right? That's a very noble mission, a big mission for a company with such as humble beginnings as us. And this mission statement actually was accidentally crowdsourced. So when we were running our sites, people would email us and say, hey, you know, I print out your photos and I take it to my grandmother who's in the hospital and we share a laugh for a few minutes. Or, hey, I have this really crappy job and I go to your sites to escape for a few minutes. And so we adopted that, and we felt like this really reflected why we existed. So for a company who wants to make the world happy for a few minutes a day, let me share with you the three lessons. The first lesson we learned is that there are more of them than there are of you. And with you, I mean the professional content creators or the editors out there. There's so many more of them, the unwashed masses out there. And so this is a chart that I have scientifically measured, not really, that shows you the relationship between the Earth and the Sun. In fact, I think the Earth is much smaller compared to the Sun. And this is how usually the media sees people, right? All this people, the laymen, the audience we're supposedly serving, and then us, the media, right? And it's those people and us, and there's a huge gap in between. And you can't really cross over unless you're a professional and so on. Well, it turns out that because of digital technologies, users create more content in a day than the media does in an entire year. Right, think about that for a second. All the emails that you write, all the photos that your friends take and upload to Facebook, all the voicemails people leave you, all the text messages that your kids are sending, add them all up, and it amounts to an astounding amount of data and content. The trick is, how do you find quality in that? And the quality here is in the eyes of the people who consume that content. If you look at Facebook and if you look at Twitter, and Facebook's probably a better example of this, people are entertained by the mundane things done by the people that they know, rather than the extraordinary things that people who are distant from them do. Right? So if you think about world politics, right, the Palestinians asking for statehood at the UN means very little to somebody whose sister is going through some funny situation on Facebook. Right? We've learned as journalists that proximity and context matter a great deal. We just didn't realize how much of a vast difference there was between contextually relevant based on people around us versus contextually relevant for people we know nothing about. So people have called us weird, and that's okay. We accept that, right? But thanks to the internet, we're not alone. So if you were ever an outcast in high school because you were a nerd or a band geek, right? You know what this is like. And then you went to college and probably found your tribe. Right? The internet helps you find your tribe almost instantly. You get on and there's something for everybody. And I'll give you an example. Perspective, award, success, fame, perhaps one day they'll be yours. But the fact is, nothing you'll ever do will be more popular than this online picture of bacon taped to a cat. This is true. This cat photo has been seen by millions and millions of people. More people have seen this photo than have seen your articles or news reports. Think about how humbling that is, right? Some dude taped bacon to the side of a cat, uploaded to the internet. It's not exactly high art. You can either hate it or love it, and to me, When you are weird, when you're being called weird and strange, we don't mind being misunderstood by many to be loved by a handful of people. And it's the handful of people that actually make an impact in your life. Right? It's not the number of people who love you, and I know we talked about big stats, but the big stats came from the fact that we had a handful of people who loved what we did. Right? And it's this story about scale, how you start with a small seed and how you grow from that. That's a great lesson that we learned. 10,000 true fans is a lot. Millions of people visiting you every day comes from having a handful of small people who believe in what you do and who believe that you are unique and that you're delivering a differentiated product to them. And it's these people, lesson number 2, that you want to help succeed. If they win, you win. In many cases, I've spoken to people in music, film, television, and now journalism as well, but they talk about how their values and their success differs from that of their consumer. And that's a gap we have to close. If you want to win in a world where people have infinite number of choices, you must help your audience succeed. If you see the audience as them, if you see the audience as the adversary, and a lot of newsrooms still do, 8th grade reading level, people who won't subscribe to my newspaper, right? If you see it as them, you will not help them succeed. You can either spend all your time fighting them, like the record industry is trying to sue copyright infringers out of existence, or you can help them, like make music available for 99 cents. It is not a coincidence that the availability of popular music at a good price point has almost wiped out copyrighted infringement on music. Right? People would rather pay you for the services if you make it easy for them, but for some reason we keep trying to make it hard for them to consume our products. And in fact, a lot of journalists are getting this, and they're trying to get out there and they're trying to understand social media. And from a world where you print once, you write once, and you print millions of copies, we still see the world as a broadcast mechanism. And one of the things that we found out is that it's all about matchmaking. And this is an example of a Tetris love poem, okay? You know that feeling you get right before you get a Tetris? Yeah, you make me feel like that. Right, so that's actually Tetris, that's not empty. So when this comes down here, if you know Tetris, it'll actually go down 4 lines, like you win. This is a nerd love poem seen by millions of people. I can't imagine Hallmark making this. Right? But we created a playground where nerds like this can get together and show their appreciation for the oddities, all the weirdness, where strangers can get together and say, I am like you. So, what does that make people do if you give them what they want? They're more likely to advertise a business for free than ever before. In the 1950s and 60s, when mass commercial advertising came into being, it was new and fascinating. 50 years later, we are tired of mass advertising. We are jaded, we're cynical. However, for some reason, if you had a great experience with a business and you get on Twitter, guess what you're going to say? I had an amazing experience with this business, you should go visit. Somehow, when it becomes personal, when you engage with the business in a positive way, the barrier between commercial and personal breaks down. Right? And social media enables this. If you match people with the right products and services, if you match people with the right stories and the right emotional connection, they're more than happy to tell the world about what a great experience they had and how other people should go to as well. But the way they tell this story, they're not telling your story. A lot of people talk about preserving brands and expanding their brands and their media. It's not about that. It's about their story. It's about their connection that they had. And in fact, you end up with brands that have experiences like this. I'm not sure Toyota wants this comparison, but they're going to get it. It's the user story that they're telling. Imagine this guy, this person who uploaded this, going around going, wow, that truck logo, that looks really familiar. Where did I see it? Oh yeah, Frank Zappa's mustache. Are you kidding? Like, I would have never thought of that. But now, this person has created an interesting piece of commentary on Toyota's brand. And here's Puma. I have no idea what they had to do to get the cat to lie down like that. But this is their story, and they're more than happy to interact with your newspaper or your TV station if you allow them to take your brand and make it their own. So the third lesson here is that technology actually builds new cultures. So what's the difference between a rock star and a musician? Television. Television is the difference between a rock star and a musician. Number of groupies. Number of groupies is a result of television. Prior to the advent of your ability to see your musician perform live on stage, you could not have a deep emotional connection. Not a lot of people could have a deep emotional connection with them. Right? The Beatles and Elvis came alive in an era where television swept across this country. And those two became the icons of rock stardom even to this day. Because for the first time, you could sit in your living room and you could see the emotion, the passion that comes out of playing music. And you could become a groupie. Right? This connection, this technology changed the way we understand popular culture forever. Prior to television, you had musicians. After television, you had rock stars. And in the same way, we are seeing the transition of something like MTV, which is an institution of popular culture that is driven by the production of media, TV shows, award shows, and so on. I would position ourselves on the other side, which is we're a user-driven company. We are the embodiment of an internet culture. We are that thing that looks really odd right now that we will take for granted 10 years from today. That user-generated content, which seems weird, strange, and low quality, will begin to actually become more and more part of everyday life. We call this the difference between the internet versus the interwebs. If anybody has ever used the term interwebs, you're probably doing it because it was ironic, right? Or intertubes or something like that. But actually, it turns out there's a difference between the internet and the interwebs. This is an example of the internet, right? Things you use. Nothing wrong with these companies. These are great companies with, amazing products that have made lasting impact on the internet. However, this is I consume, therefore I use the internet. Right? This is more of a verb-like use of the word internet. And then there are companies like this, right? Which is all about the experience, all about participation. This is the intertubes or the internets, right? Or the interwebs, or whatever you want to call it. This is a place where I live. And people will say, I live on the internet, or I live in intertubes. This is what they're talking about. They're not talking about transactions that they did on Amazon. They're talking about the experience they had, the culture that they participated in, because they had an amazing experience on the intertubes. And this culture, this technology of internet that is transforming how we used to interact with media from one way to two ways, from consumption to participatory, is creating the unwashed masses that we all see. Chuck Norris facts that I mentioned before. Tay Zonde, anybody know this guy? Chocolate Rain? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Where the hell is Matt? This is basically a guy who goes around the world dancing really awkwardly with people, videotaping it, and uploading on YouTube. That's his job. He left Microsoft to do this. That sounds weird, right? Go watch his videos and tell me that you are not about to tear up. It is amazing. It's moving. And no TV executive would have greenlighted a show of semi-chubby dude who's a geek dancing really awkwardly in Africa. But here, the internet has brought this to you, and what people are doing is they're doing it themselves. They're going to go and emulate this when they go travel. I participate, therefore I am a part of the internet. So the internet culture will produce the rock stars of tomorrow, because not because of mass distribution, but because of the deep level of engagement. Because I can be one of those 10,000 true fans of an idea, or a meme, or a brand, or a person. So those are the three lessons that I'm bringing to you. That's me on Twitter, or you can find me on G+. And if you have any questions, I will answer them. I do have actually a journalism-related project that I'll talk about in a little bit. And I'm really fast on time, so this is awesome. You guys can actually have beers really early. So, questions? Anybody? Yeah, I'll repeat your question, so go ahead and ask.
Yeah, sure. So it sounds like a lot of this stuff, it's going to give people that 15 minutes of fame, and like Antoine Dodson,
Sure.
He had his year or whatever, and that's fine. But if that's all you're going to do is sing around the world and make a fool of yourself, great. It's worth a chuckle. but am I going to keep going back for that? I don't think so. So how, if you're trying to produce something that's unique and that hopefully is going to, have an impact, and, a lot of us are serious journalists, not to say that this isn't, fun. I need my 5 minutes of laughter every day too, but,
How do you make it sustainable?
Yeah. How is it sustainable?
So the question is,
how does it help make the world a better place?
Sure. I think that I have a fundamental belief that if you allow people to participate in the creation of their own culture, that the world will become a better place. Right? Thank you. I think that's the first time anybody's clapped for that. You guys are an idealistic bunch. Yes, that's true. I believe that if people have control over what is being shown in front of them, if people have control over what they're consuming in terms of media, that they will help create a better world. And if you want to worry about how much a flash in the pan is, we're in the world of Matt. Each season, he generates $300,000 in revenue. It may be a flash in the pan for you, but for him, he's been able to change his life. Antoine Dawson moved his family out of the projects because he said something crazy on television, the local newscast, right? I mean, if you combine all these little acts of internet craziness, you could live on them forever, right? Antoine Dawson happened this year. Something else will happen next year. In fact, anybody know Rebecca Black, the song Friday? Right. Guess which site broke that content? The Daily What? Right? So actually, the guy in Boston is responsible for the fact that you have to sit through that. So I apologize on his behalf. This stuff will happen over and over again. There's so many of them, and they're so weird, this will continue to happen. And it's okay to be weird. I mean, that's one of the lessons that we learned, is that it is really okay to dress in a cat t-shirt and go to conferences and end up on GQ's 10 worst dressed list. That's okay. It's totally fine. It's weird, it's entertaining, and it'll continue to go on. I hope that answered your question. Yeah. Go ahead, just ask. I'll repeat the question. It's okay.
Curious about your take on when the traditional outlets are becoming and doing it themselves. So you saw in the music industry with Justin Bieber, or the site that portrayed pictures of the girl who quit with the whiteboard.
Yeah.
What about when it's turned on its head? What's your take on that?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the question.
Curious what you think about when it's turned on its head and when the traditionals kind of plant something out there. Are you cool with that? Do you think that's where they should be going? Or are you thinking that they should spend their time looking for the authentic story to tell?
So what's the value of inauthentic meme generation, right? Or viral generation? People are really good at spotting the fakes from the real ones. We have become so good at finding out what is authentic and inauthentic. We just have a gut feel for it now. So I have to trust, here's a guy standing in front of you who's built a business, who wakes up every morning to find free work that's done for him in his inbox. Right? We have anywhere from 12 to 15,000 pieces of content submitted to us every single day. So if you're working on a media site, you're working on stories days, weeks out. Right? There's a pipeline of stuff that's coming in. I wake up every day to find my pipeline filled. Right? What that does is it helps me believe in the power of humanity. That people are there to support each other, to build a community. Like Twitter and Facebook, the same thing. What stops them from actually stop tweeting today? Nothing, right? So if we have faith in humanity, then I have to believe that people can tell the inauthentic from the authentic. So, yeah. And the whiteboard girl was exposed as a fake. I mean, we figured that out. People are apparently really good at digging into that stuff. I hear journalists may have been involved. Yes, back over there.
Hi. I run CNN's Geek Out blog.
Hello.
And this is Twitter, my element. What I find interesting about this, and what I'm curious what you think of, is that as the internet has brought us all closer together and affordable technology has really made the world a much smaller place, what you said about people finding their tribes, I find that to be absolutely true in the journalism that I do for CNN. But what I also find is that things like lolcats are helping these tribes document themselves. And as journalists, we haven't found nerds to be very serious or important, I think, in the history of journalism. And for the first time, we're documenting this culture.
Yeah.
How do you see lolcats as the kind of the artifact of these cultures?
So somebody asked me a question. This question actually gets quite often, which is why cats? Right? There's plenty of animals out there, but why cats? So what I tell them is cats are a great canvas for the human emotion. Right? Cats can make very expressive faces. If anybody here owns a cat, they'll know what I'm talking about. Like, the cat can love you and then absolutely hate you with all its being in the next moment. Right? And so when you capture that in film, it becomes a really great place for us to actually put our feelings and say it in a non-offensive or non-threatening manner. Like, it's one thing for Mr. T to say, I pity the fool. It's another thing for a cute kitten to say, I pity the fool with a mohawk. So the message comes across very differently. Right? It's not as threatening. It's not as aggressive. And so yes, using characters and memes and animals does allow us to actually express perhaps a different side of our human emotion. And we may not have done that if it wasn't for that canvas. So, yeah. Anyone else? Yes, right behind you there.
I, as probably a lot of people here, work for a large, established, stodgy institution, and I'm wondering if you have any examples of large, stodgy journalistic institutions that have successfully harnessed some of the spirit that you're trying to.
So I'll specifically address leveraging user-generated content. And when it comes to large, stodgy journalistic institutions, unfortunately, I have not seen one. It's kind of sad, but in fact, journalists are not alone, right? Large, stodgy media companies have tried their hand at user-generated content and failed miserably as well. And one of the reasons that happens, and I see a pattern, is that it is still us versus them, right? A lot of people who go into user-generated content, especially from large companies, go in with the idea that the users will do free labor, right? It's not true. Users won't do free labor. Users will do what makes them happy. And so we spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about how do we create tools, how do we create culture, how do we create an environment that has inherent value in them creating content. Content is a byproduct of their enjoyment of our community, not the first product. So if we create an environment where they're appreciated, that they're loved, and they're recognized for what they do, then yes, they will create content for you. But they're not going to do you free labor. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Dorian Ben Coyle. I can say that the lesson I take away is be a platform, not a professional content creator. You know, what you just said actually resonates, because you said we take the attitude of create the environment, not the content. A lot of journalistic culture is about creating content, and I wonder if they're, you know, kind of not diametrically opposed, but on different sides of the spectrum. Neither one, I'm not denigrating either one. You know, each has incredible value.
Yeah.
But a lot of people go into the journalistic mindset with the idea that, you know, I will be a filter, I will choose, I will portray this. And yes, you may participate, and I can definitely curate, cultivate, and have you help me inform. But as an organization, we have a brand, and that brand is at the head. So I'm just wondering if you know, looking at it from both a cultural and even a business perspective, if we're kind of talking about two different worlds and orientations.
Yeah. So I'm an armchair journalist, right? If there's such a thing. Like, I don't practice journalism, yet I feel connected enough to the journalism world to say bad things about it. I'm one of those guys. Okay. So caveat that. Prior to the internet, public media could get away with telling the same story 20 different times in 20 different places. Nothing unique. Newspapers were given a de facto monopoly in a region. They had higher than market supportable ad rates. Therefore, they sustained this kind of unsustainable business until they almost fell off a cliff. Right? And with the advent of the internet, with people being able to access the same news and realize that they don't need to go to the newspaper to read the AP story from 2 days ago, what it did was it raised the bar for content creation. Right? It was no longer possible for you to make a living rewriting the same AP story for your local area. You had to find something unique and interesting. Right? You see the rise of local blogs, you see the rise of niche publications because they found something different. And that's actually good for the content economy. It just means that journalists are forced to change the type of skill that they have, right? Sure, if you are on the high end, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal of the world, you've got a great brand and you can kind of live off that for a while. Or if you're serving a really small market, a niche market that no one else is in, then there's lack of competition that actually allows you to do that. But it's the middle that suffers, right? It's the middle, the regional, the citywide newspapers and magazines that are really suffering because I feel that journalists forgot what it meant to write for an audience. Like journalists became a way for publishers to make money. And so if the argument here is we need to provide better quality content, then we have to ask ourselves, what does quality mean? Right? Is it highbrow journalism that's investigative, that we can expose things and go back to the days of muckraking? Is that what we're supposed to be doing? Maybe. Is it human interest stories and stories from people who are local and near and contextually relevant to us that we haven't surfaced before? Maybe. And that's kind of the danger, I guess, of being a journalist today, is that no one has given you a clear path, but I really don't have any doubt that journalism will thrive. Right? I got into journalism school because I was passionate about it, not because I wanted to make money. Right? I know that making money is a big, important part of staying alive, and I recognize that. The fact of the matter is, a lot of you would do this regardless of how much they paid you. A lot of you would have gotten into it regardless of how much you were going to make in the future. Because we're passionate about telling other people's stories and telling the truth. And that will continue to live on no matter what the economy of journalism is. Right? No matter who makes money and how many publishing empires there may be, if you want to tell the story of the people that are around you and want to tell it well, those people will still continue to live. And that's what journalism is. And I feel that's a little idealistic, but I feel like we can continue to do that on the internet. So, yeah, go ahead.
This sort of is not attached to what he was talking about, but I have a question about sort of sassiness in lolcats and how that compares to journalism. We see a lot, and since you're sort of the king of snark, I would say, we see a lot of news organizations sticking to very traditional media, but I've also seen on certain websites, like, for example, NBC Chicago, they have a little bit more edge in their web content and like how they write their stories. How do you think that will affect the future of journalism, especially online? I
think you should continue to evolve your different media channels for the audience that it drives. So if you are actually reading print off of paper, you are likely to be older, and snark will probably work less with you. If you are getting your news through Twitter, snark's all you're gonna need. Right? It's a different audience. And so if you treat all of them the same way, I think you're just going after a fly with a hammer. Right? You've got to be able to actually target that audience and deliver the thing that they want and the thing that they expect. So I would absolutely encourage you to separate your social media tone from the tone of your publication, from the tone of the internet. So I'm actually going to talk about, these are some questions if you guys didn't ask, I was going to answer. I am actually allergic to cats, just so that you know. So I've been working on this thing called the Moby Dick project. And it's a side project unrelated to my company. It's just because I am the armchair journalist who really wants to be one. But the question that Moby Dick project asks is, what if journalism was invented today? What if journalism didn't exist and we all woke up and said, hey, we should report or we should write about things that are going on in this world and tell them to each other? What would that look like? So some of the things that we're challenging is the article and the reverse pyramid. Right? My friend Dan Cinco, who you'll probably hear from tomorrow, I would highly recommend it, said, we've been writing the news the same way since the Civil War. Right? Like, how many of you were reading the Arab Spring on some website, and you were reading like the updated story, and you're like halfway down the article and going, didn't I read this before? Like, only the lead paragraph is new, but everything else is exactly the same. And it happens to you over and over and over again. And that artifact came from the fact that we used to push out news articles over wires, and that people would put editions to bed, and each edition got the latest update. And so they never imagined that the same person would read the same updated story 5 times. And that's a credibility problem for journalism. Oh, you just wasted my time. Why don't you just tell me what was new? But we keep getting stuck in this idea of article in the reverse pyramid because that's the way things are done. The loss of collective memory. If you Google hard enough, you'll know what the homepage of CNN looked like, CNN.com looked like on 9/11. But it surprises me that you can't do that on CNN. You can't just drag a bar that says, take me back to my birthday. What did CNN.com look like on my birthday? You can't do that. Why is that? If you walk through the New York Times offices, you will see the amazing front pages of the newspaper when man landed on the moon. What do you have today? We don't. We lost this collective memory. And also, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with this. If you guys ever want to get a really popular story, it isn't to write a popular story. It is to get it on the homepage of your publication. Right? How many of you are familiar with this phenomenon? Okay. I was talking to some editors at AOL, and they basically said, I spend 40% of my time writing my story, 60% of my time lobbying to end up on somebody's homepage. Crowdsourcing and filtering. This stuff is relatively new. Journalism has very little idea of how to use it. CNN's iReport's trying really hard. We should try harder. And this one's always controversial. I feel like there should be more perspectives and more opinion in the news, but I don't quite know how to encourage that and encourage, fact-checking and being honest and things like that. So this is just a list of challenges that I've had and that I want to address with the Moby Dick project. If journalism was invented today, how would you deliver the news? And it's very, very hard for somebody who spent his life studying journalism and loving it to see what the world would look like if there were no articles. But anyway, so if you're interested in the Moby Dick project, you can always email me, benha@gmail.com. So I'll take one or two more questions about this or anything else. Yeah.
I really appreciated the passionate little speech you gave about idealism in journalism and the sense of community you've created. Now I'm going to ask the ugly money question.
Sure.
Can you just tell me two things? One, with the 20 million hits a month, what is the business model for turning that into a profit for your company? And also, you talked about this pipeline of 15,000 items that you wake up to every morning. How much human curation is involved in that, and how do you do that?
So I'll answer the curation question. It is 100% human curated, whether it's done by our community. So we ask our community to create the content, to curate the content, to market the content, and then I don't know what else. But we ask them to do pretty much everything. Right? We have paid editors who actually are the last line of defense and so on. But every single piece of content that's on our homepages that are featured are curated by our public as well as our editors. And we make pretty much almost all of our money through advertising. Right? So we are arguably the largest humor destination on the internet. And that's the scale that you need to run. We have 87 employees. And so we run an 87-person operation. And that's as big as one of the world's largest humor destinations look like. It's pretty small.
And you're profitable now?
We are not profitable. I raised that $30 million. So one of the things I have to do is spend it. So no, we are not profitable right now. But we were before, yes. It's very weird to take a profitable company and go put in the red. Not many people do that, unless they're suicidal. Anybody else? One more question? Over there?
Those last 5 points that you hit on, is that something you're working on and building right now?
Yeah, the Moby Dick project is something, we actually did a working session at Stanford, sponsored by Knight Foundation, thank you very much, where we brought 80 people together and said, if you had to reimagine how to deliver the news and how to curate it, what would it look like? And they actually came up with some really amazing ideas. And so what I'm trying to figure out is, how do I answer this question, and what can I build that isn't owned by any one person, that allows journalists to deliver the news for the 21st century without having to be stuck in the old paradigm? Like, how do we do that? Yeah, so this is an active project right now. We're working with Stanford University and a professor there, as well as some students, and we're trying to figure out what the next step is. And we're debating whether we should do a hackathon or something. But I'd imagine this is something that's relevant to this audience. I mean, why are we still writing the reverse pyramid? Yes?
This project, are you also working on that point about fast? I wrote a post on my blog about the need to reinvent fast.
This? Oops.
No, loss of collectedness.
Yeah, this is actually part of, so we basically outlined a whole bunch of problems that seem to exist in today's journalism culture for reasons I don't understand, like why no one has seemed to really feel like these are problems, and I basically wrote about them and said, I feel like these things need to be solved, and so that's the stage that it's at. I see that this is a problem, like just like I see this as a problem. I don't know how we're going to solve these problems per se, but it requires the participation of people who are in journalism to tell me whether the answer is right or wrong. So, yeah. One more question? Yeah. I think we're done then. Okay. Great.
Can I announce the caption winner?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, the caption is, I wear these cat eyes so Ben-Ha will give me cheeseburger equity. And it's L.A. Lorick.
Woo!
Some other good ones came from House of Marshall. I can has internets because it makes famous people talks to me. D. Pettit said, I ate too much cheeseburger, Dad, I turned into a lowly cat. And Samantha Kubota, I can has sneaky eye cover for the peoples in the conference. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.